All right, it looks like we have everyone that's signed up to join us today. Thank you all so much for joining again on this month's WCMA members only webinar. Today we'll focus on a hot topic, current trends in cheese sales. My name is Grace Atherton. I'm your communications director at WCMA, and I'm very pleased to be with you this afternoon to run our webinar and to bring to you three experts on this topic that we're very excited to have giving us this deep dive into some interesting numbers and interesting analysis. So we will do a quick introduction of our speakers and give you an overview here of what our agenda looks like for today. First, we'll talk through some of the highlights of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's 2022 Dairy Product Report. Then we'll turn to some insights and an outlook on Hispanic style cheeses. And then follow that up with some insights and an outlook on Parmesan, followed by a Q&A before we wrap up. If you think of any questions as we are going through our presentations today, please feel free to drop those right in the chat, and we will make sure that our speakers have a chance to talk with you about those toward the end of the program. Please make sure your mics are muted to make sure we can avoid any interruptions during the presentations. And I also want to note for you that this will be recorded, and we'll send out a link to that recording to members, to all of you later this week, along with some links to resources and contact information. So if you miss anything on any of these PowerPoints or you miss a detail, don't worry, we've got you covered. We'll send that out later on this week. To start us off, just a quick introduction to our three speakers that we have joining us today. John Umhafer has witnessed over 30 years of growth and change in cheese sales across various categories as WCMA's executive director. Paul Scharfman is the president of Specialty Cheese Company out of Reeseville, Wisconsin, a manufacturer of award-winning specialty cheeses from around the world. That includes Indian cheeses, Middle Eastern cheeses, and the topic he'll talk to us about today, Hispanic styles as well. And Bob Greco is a 25-year veteran of the cheese world. He is the president and CEO of Cheese Merchants, which is a converter of award-winning cheeses with a focus on hard Italian styles. So without further ado, why don't we get started? John, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's June Dairy Month, so we thought when we built this that it would be time to take a look at sales, take a look at how the industry is doing as we celebrate the industry. So I've grabbed a few slides from our friends at DMI who get the IRI scanner data, and we've got to look at both the volume and dollar sales in the first roughly 6 months, end of May here of the year. So I highlighted the volume as first the bad news, but actually you see things are down 1.6% through May of 2023, but a little kick up in the last 4 weeks in this survey ending in May. So then there's the dollar side. You've got an uptick, probably basically an inflation-related uptick in a soft market. So better dollar sales, but you want to watch that volume, and volume is starting to recover after a slow start. But I think it's interesting to look at the next slide and put it this year in perspective. I've put a little green circle there around the last few years at this point in May. That is bunched together there. 2021, 22, and 23 are all touching inside that little green dashed circle there. Those 3 years, the last 3 years are really tracking. As you can see, you see the 2020 COVID spike in red up above when people went running to the grocery store for everything they could find. But I think what's most interesting about this data from IRI is that all of these years are tracking above 2019, what you might call the last normal year. And so as I've written before, we're at a new plateau on the retail side. We've stayed above what was normal now into our 4th year. It's good to see that dairy was taken into the home during that pandemic, and people stayed with it. And I think the styles we're going to talk about today are great examples of people who took home cheeses to cook at home and have really stuck with it. So on the next slide, it also tracks here. These are the top four. If you look at the far most right side of this, that's the last 52 years of sales growth. The top performing four cheeses in categories, the styles are Parmesan, Jack, Queso Fresco, and Italian blends, right off the scanner data from grocery stores. So the cheeses we're talking about today, you know, the quesos and the Parmesans and the Jacks and the Italian blend, they're all just right on the category here for what we're talking about today. Those are our hot cheeses in the United States. So then I was going to bop over to the USDA data and move from sales over to production. And of course, you hopefully all see this doc. It's a treasure trove of information, comes out every April. So we've got 2022 here with us this time of year. So what do we got next? Overall, you've got that trend that I hope you've all memorized. Cheese has been going up for longer than this chart can show, but there's only so much room on the PowerPoint. But it's great news. It's a continuing growth line. 70% growth in U.S. cheese consumption and production should be matched pretty well since 2000. So just a good steady incline in production matched by growth. And here's a look at the top 7 states producing cheese. This is an area graph, so think of it as mountain ranges. Wisconsin is in blue and all below. California, they're in the gold. And then there's a tight fit there that we're going to expand on in the next slide for Idaho, New Mexico, New York, Minnesota, South Dakota. California looking strong, but has flattened out in growth. Wisconsin's still creeping up. Seeing some good upward trend there in South Dakota. And even Minnesota has got an upward trend that's impressive. But in the next slide, I'd like to show you those bottom 5. These behind Wisconsin and Minnesota, these are the states, excuse me, Wisconsin and California. These are the states vying for that 3rd position, 4th, 5th, 6th. And you see that New Mexico is really creeping up on Idaho's production there. And meanwhile, you've got Minnesota and New York in a pitched battle there for the next position. And again, that good growth in South Dakota, which is probably still on an upward trajectory. So just an interesting way, I hope, to look at the states that are producing most of the natural cheese in the United States. Except on the next slide, you don't have Texas data coming out of USDA because they claim that there's not enough plants for them to present data. I think that's going to change in the next couple of years when you see, for example, the Lubbock factory come online with Leprino and a couple others. I think USDA will find that that's tipped into enough data to make anonymous the numbers they collect. And when Texas hits the books, it's going to jump right into 5th or 6th place in the United States. So what you saw there is not fair representation in the sense that Texas is a strong and will be a stronger cheese producing state in the next few years. So moving on. So I wanted to break things down a little bit using that data. This is data actually from Wisconsin and the WAS, the Wisconsin Agricultural Statistics Service. They've been tracking since about 92 specialty cheese production in the state, and those are great numbers. If you happen to see them every year, they are available online. And this is just the aggregate of all Wisconsin specialty cheese. Again, a good upward trend. This is production, so you did see a little dip in 2020, but 61% growth in the last dozen years for the specialty products in Wisconsin, and good growth in the last 2 years. And next I have, I'm going to focus in now on our 2 speakers products, and then they'll expound in greater detail on sales. This is production, and I looked at Wisconsin and US for all these products. Hispanic side, Wisconsin, strong growth on Hispanic, 117% growth in the last dozen years. So very proud to see that. And it's matched by, on the next slide, good growth across the United States. And when you look at the US numbers from USDA, you see 72% growth in the last dozen years for Hispanic styles. So approaching 400 million pounds of Hispanic production in the United States. So if we go to the next one, just to overlap them, you see Wisconsin's producing about a third of the Hispanic cheese in the United States, and California is another huge producer of Hispanic styles. But again, Texas is another place where Hispanic's coming on strong. So then I was going to flip over to our other speakers' products. You see Parmesan here also is on a growth track. I'd love to hear Bob talk about that. It's a little more of a roller coaster ride, so that might be fun to hear from him about. But still, in Wisconsin, doubled really in the last decade, 104% growth. And then if you look nationally at Parmesan, you've again got that mimicked roller coaster there a little bit, but overall 71% growth and a good 2 bars there in the COVID and post-COVID era, 71% growth in the last 12 years and a good lift in the last few years for Parmesan. And superimposed again, just worth noting, Wisconsin is making about half the Parmesan in the United States. So that's strong for the dairy state in June Dairy Month. So that's kind of what I was going to present to feed into our featured speakers. And I'm going to take it back then to Grace to introduce Paul.
Right. Thank you very much, John. Very interesting to look at all that data, especially superimposed between Wisconsin and the US. And who knew Texas is poised to elbow its way up into the top numbers pretty soon. So moving along to our first kind of deep dive into one of these categories, as I mentioned, Paul Scharfman of Specialty Cheese Companies here. Paul, I don't want to take up any more of your time because I know you've got plenty of great stuff to dive into here. So I will turn it right over to you.
Thank you so very much, Grace and John. Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Scharfman. I am the president of the Specialty Cheese Company. We've been trying to make cheese for 30 some years. I got into the business. I'm a nice Jewish boy. I came from New York to Wisconsin to make cheese for Mexicans living in Texas. What could go wrong? So we've been at it and trying to go up and down and all around. And we've enjoyed growth. Would you turn to the next slide, please, Grace? As John pointed out, Hispanic cheese has become significant. It's a significant growth category, and it's got real tonnage behind it. Why? Because it's become mainstream. When I started started exploring it in 1990 and 1991, it was a little bit difficult to explain to people in Wisconsin that I wanted to make cheese for Hispanics. It was a little bit of what's that? Now Hispanic cuisine is mainstream. More and more restaurants have it on their menu. More and more people of non-Hispanic descent consider Hispanic food to be yummy. We all eat tacos. Why not? I suspect that our children will refer to Hispanic cuisine the way I do as Italian. I'm old enough to remember when my father would bring me to an Italian restaurant once every long time growing up, and it was unusual. And we took adventures. We tried something called spaghetti. It was really weird. Well, Hispanic cuisine was that way 30 some years ago. It's not anymore. It's mainstream. Next slide, please. As more and more people enjoy Hispanic cuisine, retailers are catching the idea that they should not allow Hispanic cheeses to only be sold in Hispanic stores. So they're bringing in these cheeses, and more mainstream grocers have some Hispanic cheese in their store. As points of distribution increase, so does tonnage. These retailers want to attract both the Hispanic consumer away from their ethnic stores, and they're finding demand from Anglos for whom Hispanic cuisine is part of their normal cuisine. Next slide, please. The final reason for growth is immigration. Now, the data here is terrible. I have many customers who can give me firsthand accounts around what they see, but the hard data is lacking. It does seem that during the pandemic, there was a net exodus of people of Hispanic descent, but no longer. More and more people from Central America and Mexico are entering the United States, it seems. Again, I don't have hard data. I can further say that our experience in the last several years is that the influx, some from Mexico, but more from the other parts of Central America. And the reason for that is their economies. We may read that the horrible brutality and drugs and violence seem to make those places miserable. The citizens and residents of those countries don't report that. The reason that the people who leave those countries come to the United States, well, the reason they give is the economies. It turns out that there were many, many people who live in Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras who subsisted for generations on rice, beans, tortillas, and a cheese called quesillo, but it's cheese. Well, there's not as much milk made because there's not as many people on the mountains milking cows. With less milk, there's a shortage of milk. El Salvador has barred the export of milk products so that their residents have enough to eat. The price of beans has doubled. That's a big deal. People leave, there's less labor. That makes it harder to process food. Means harvesting costs go up, prices go up, which drives more people to leave, and you have a vicious cycle. Net exodus from Central America is net immigration into this country, and it is driving Hispanic demand across the United States. Next slide, please. So what's going to happen in the future? Laugh out loud. I don't know, but I can tell you what I think. The trend of growth in Hispanic cheese has been going on for at least 20 years. I'm here to say it's been 30. And what I see is that more and more restaurateurs say their menu should include something with what I'll call Mexican flair. I think that is going to continue. I think people of my skin color are increasingly going to say, I want Mexican food, in the same way that we used to say we wanted Italian food. It's just part of food. Mexican has become American just as much as pizza, spaghetti, and meatballs. Next slide, please. With the growth in Anglo acceptance, with the growth in immigration, more retailers are going to put more items into their stores for Hispanic cuisine. It's not a big secret that the retailers are going to pursue whatever is selling across the spectrum. Hispanic is selling. They're going to be more receptive to putting in new items, different flavor varieties, and more value added, shreds, snack sizes, and flavored cheeses. Next slide, please. And finally, immigration, which is a horrible political football. And I don't want to say what should happen or what could happen. I want to say what's, I think, most likely to happen. It's a bit of a laugh out loud. What do you think is going to happen to immigration? But my prediction is we're not going to expel anyone. Political rhetoric aside, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think the people who are here from Central America and Mexico are going to want to go back home. Those countries are inhospitable for any number of reasons, mostly because their economies are in tatters. There's nothing to which to go home. How much will immigration grow? Will it be flat? It's anyone's guess. I'm here to say I think immigration will continue apace, and with it, another growth factor for Hispanic cheese. That's all I got. Thank you very much, Grace. Back to you.
Thank you, Paul. I think we're going to have some interesting questions for you out of that, but it's great to get that look at the full picture of what you think is going on with those Hispanic styles and where it might go in the future. Although, as you say, gosh, wouldn't we all love to be able to see into that crystal ball for all these different categories. Next up, we will move on to a popular favorite, as we'll see, Parmesan. We have Bob Greco here with Cheese Merchants, the president and CEO, and he is ready to give us a great deep dive into Cheese Merchants itself and what's going on with Parmesan.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, John and Paul, for the info and data. So I'll start with a little bit of intro about myself and our company. The company here, my name is Bob Greco. I'm the president and CEO of Cheese Merchants of America. We have 3 facilities in northwestern Illinois, which includes an aging facility as well as we age our own Parm and Parmesan. The CFR for Parm ages is 10 months. We're also a vertically integrated cheese company. We have 2 cheese plants, one in Duran, Wisconsin, O'Galley cheese, and another make plant called Dairy State in Rudolph. So we are a fully integrated hard Italian cheese processor that process really focuses on just Parmesan, Romano, and Asiago. Next slide, please. My father started this company 25 years ago. I've been with the company since the onset. We are a family-run business. I'm Gen 2. Gen 3 has started in this, and the family's goals is to continue to keep it growing. We're mostly a private label processor in food service, retail, and food ingredients. So we do every type of process, and we do mostly broad line and large retailers, private label in the industry. Cheese Merchants is encompassed to almost 7 facilities. We have 1 million square feet as we've been vertically integrating and making acquisitions to continue to grow. But mostly the focus here, I would say, is continue to grow the hard Italian category. Next slide, please. So this is the Cheese Merchants being the mothership of our company. The 2 vertical integrations, as we spoke about, that produces Parm, Dairy State and Rudolph. It's about a 50 million pound facility up in central Wisconsin that makes block Parm. Sole customer is Cheese Merchants. O'Galley is a wheel plant that makes Parmesan, Romano, and Asiago wheels. Cheese Merchants is the sole customer, complete vertical integration up in Duran, Wisconsin. We also own a fresh mozzarella company, Toscana Cheese, that makes Ovellini, Bocconcini, Ciliencini, Burrata, and logs. It's a portfolio integration, and we also dabble a little bit in plant-based with a partnership in Home and Cheese and a brand, Selfish Cow. So sorry to bring up any bad words here. It's a small portion of our portfolio, but we do dabble in it as well. So next page, next slide, please, Grace. So I thought this was going to be the most important slide when we came up with this deck, and John kind of referred to this slide as well. Over the last 10 years, Parmesan has jumped 55% since 2013. It continues to rise as we see it, and what I want to put a little bit of color to it. When we started Cheese Merchants in 1998 and probably up to 2008 and 2010, we were anywhere between 70% and 90% of imports. World changed, currency changed. We used to buy from East Europe, Poland, Lithuania, obviously Italy, Australia, South America, Argentina, Uruguay. As you continue to grow, and as other hard Italian cheese companies continue to grow, you fought a lot of other facets that you don't have to fight stateside. Currency changed, obviously, with the euro. Freight component was a big problem for us, and continue to, higher rates. World markets and better returns for these countries always forced pricing problems for us. So we had to look stateside, and to control our own destiny, to continue to build this category, and we had to find supply that was consistent, and that it could continue, that was part of their plans as well, that wouldn't jump ship because other markets are emerging. So we went stateside, luckily, and different from the other plants or the other parts of the world. I would say there was a lot of motivation to make Parmesan because a lot of these plants were American style plants, and obviously with cheddar and Monterey Jack, those were low overages. They couldn't produce as much byproduct as you can with Parm because of the lower moisture, and you could produce cream to sell off for butter. So there was a good motivation to make the product. There wasn't a a lot to know about at the time. I would talk early 2000, mid 2000, but between excellent cheesemakers, the CDR, just a ton of trial and error. I would say I would put American cheese, American Parmesan cheese. I think it can rival the world now. I think they've done an exceptional job over the last 15 years. The flavor has been great, and it just continues to grow. And so if we fast forward it now, 2023, we're probably at 85% domestic as opposed to as it vice versa from imports from just 15, 20 years ago. So it continues to grow, but I think that was the big shift there. So next slide, please. Thanks, Grace. I kind of wanted to show some of the Parmesan metrics of 2022 in food service. You can see it grew about 2.6%, a growth rate of 3.2%. You know, travel and leisure had the biggest growth. You know, post-pandemic, more people are going out. But as you can see, this market continues to grow. People still love eating parm, and it's still a big menu item. So, and that goes to our next slide as well. And this, I thought this was a very telling sign of 43.9 of operator penetration just in Parmesan in 2023. Some of the, the segments and, Italian pizza, you're at 90%, 80%, even steak, you're at 84% usage in there, or a line item on there. Some of the pairings that get with, but obviously cheese, we're a garnish cheese or an ingredient cheese, as we like to call it. Although everyone likes eating a piece of cheese, mostly it's used as an ingredient or garnish. So it always compares well with cheese, but chicken is the highest protein, and sauces would be number 2. Some of the menu ideas that continue to grow: chicken Parmesan sandwiches, parm romano, eggplant dish, and meatball sandwiches and salads always grow as well. So still good growth in our category, and continues to grow in food service and menus. So next slide, please, Grace. Thought this was some important information. Pandemic, we saw a big jump in Parmesan use, almost 30%. We relate that, and as you can see, although there was a little bit dip in 2021, it rebounded nicely in 2022. As mostly everything in the pandemic, cooking from home, and then a lot of those other categories like pasta, pizza, sauces were all elevated. Parmesan was the beneficiary of it. It's still an Italian dish, a pasta dish, a frozen pizza is still a cheap menu item for a family of 4. And as that continues to be low, we continue to see it grow. So it was a great uptick, and hopefully it maintains, but it seems like people still love Parmesan, and it continues to grow. So I thought that was good to see on the retail side of parm. Next slide, please. Lastly, as there's some innovation in Parmesan, I thought the biggest thing that show the group was the largest innovation that I've seen was in the snack, as Parmesan wasn't really a huge snack item. But the Parmesan crisp business that started several years ago has really seen some dramatic jumps, following a lot of the keto diet, very low carbs, high protein. As you can see, it's had some tremendous year. It seems to be a mainstay in any grocery store or club store now, and it continues to grow. So great innovation item for our category, continues to grow, and it looks like it's going to be a mainstay. So that's all I have for today. So any questions, I'm open to answer.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob. Really appreciate all that great insight. And I think we do have a couple of good questions we can throw at you. For right now, I'm going to give us a couple of seconds in case anyone would like to unmute and ask a question. I'll give you a little space here to jump in if you've got anything you'd like to ask right off the bat that's at the front of your mind. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone unmute, so I think it's safe to go ahead with some questions we got in advance. If you do think of any, please feel free to unmute at any time and let us know. You can also drop them in the chat as well. So
I
let's
have
start off. Oh, yes, go ahead.
this is Gurmeet from Burnett Dairy. I have a question. So the Parmesan data you have shared, does that include like a Parmesan style cheeses also? Or is it like standard of identity, all Parmesan?
Well, on the make, it's all Parmesan. That doesn't include Parmesan style products. Parmesan style products are, and sometimes you'll see it, and you'll see a lot more of that in food service for cooking applications. You see a little bit of reduced fat for styles in retail. So not a big, you'd see that more on the finished good. That wouldn't affect kind of the growth in the category. We don't see much growth in that, but you'd see that more on the finish side and obviously not on the make side.
Good question. Any others right away? All right, I'm going to turn to one we got in advance that I'm going to toss to Paul. Paul, you mentioned retailers, of course, adjusting and growing their Hispanic style cheese offerings in response to consumer demand. Without getting yourself in any legal trouble or anything, can you give us some specific examples and talk about some retailers you know of that have gone in that direction?
Sure, Grace. The trouble will be of my own making. So what I can tell you is that once upon a time in the Houston area, there was a dominant retailer named Randall's. And when I started in this business, Randall's did not want to attract those sort of people to their store. And some years later, they found that commerce required that they do. And they now are a major retailer of Hispanic cheese. Another example of that is in the Southeast, where a major retailer named Winn-Dixie didn't want to carry Hispanic cheeses. They were concerned about that clientele. And now Winn-Dixie has bunkers of Hispanic cheese. Demand trumps presumption. It seems that pretty much every retailer is selling Hispanic cheese, not necessarily in every store, but in most of them. I hope that answers your question.
Anyone have a follow-up there? Bob Starkey, I see you unmuted, but could have been a slip of the hand.
I do have a question. It's a good intro. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hey, good man.
So with that said, do you find that most retailers are, and of course we're grading Cotija, we have some Cotija sales which continue to grow on our end. Are you finding more retailers are more manufacturer brand driven, or are they, and this doesn't include, of course, like a 50-50 cheddar or Monterey Jack, which, yeah, you can market that as Hispanic, but are you finding that they're more apt to bring in a manufacturer's brand than create their own Hispanic brand?
Good question. I'm going to repeat it back to give me time to think about it. So Bob, you're asking, hey, there are several major brands in the Hispanic category, Cacique, El Mexicano, Food, and so on. Would a retailer prefer to bring in those brands, or would they prefer to make super value brand Hispanic cheese? And the answer is some of one, some of the other. And the big one is a third you didn't mention, which is the distributor's brand. Hispanic cheese, folks, is led, the biggest single item is queso fresco, which for those who don't know means fresh cheese. Queso not so fresco isn't a thing. You want fresh cheese. And the question is, how is the best way to get highly perishable cheese to the store? And often the store distributor does it best. He'll take care of the stores better than the limited store personnel. So the very biggest brands offer long life and mixed quality, but they have a brand name. The supermarkets have a tough time competing with both those big brands and the local distributor who can offer fresh, right off the truck cheese. Bob, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, buddy.
Yep.
All right. I don't see anyone else unmuting on the on that question, so I'll go ahead to one that I've got here for Bob. And that is, how does the growth in Parmesan compare to other hard Italian or Italian styles? So you mentioned Romano when you were talking about the different pairings and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how those other hard Italian styles compare?
Parmesan, obviously, in hard Italian is the leader, and as we alluded to earlier, it continues to grow. But so does Romano cheese, Asiago cheese, and we put Fontina cheese in the hard Italian, although it's considered semi-soft. Romano cheese, I would say, has the biggest growth potential. So Romano cheese here domestically is made from cow's milk. Where it originated from Sardinia in Italy is Pecorino Romano, which is made from sheep's milk. It's getting to be very, very high cost, very, very hard to milk. More and more farmers in that region are getting out of the business, and every year it's got a slow decline in make. So we're seeing a lot of conversion from imported Pecorino Romano to domestic Romano, and we're seeing a big upside. Asiago and Fontina always continue to be pleasers. They grow great cheeses. Fontina being a great eating cheese, obviously great melting cheese. Asiago having so many applications that continue to grow, but a lot on breads and different styles of breads and bagels. And so as Parmesan continues to grow, so do all the other, I would say, Italian style cheeses. And I think Romano has the potential for the most upgrowth.
Okay. I've also got one in the chat for you, Bob. We talked just a little bit very briefly there for a second about geographical indicators, especially relating to Parmesan. Is there a concern there? Anything in particular that you feel is necessary to do to fight those geographical indicators?
I would say the growth needs to continue to be stateside. And we see that we really still see a lot of plants highly motivated to continue to make parm as it's considered a specialty product. We've seen a lot of plants add on. We've seen people get into it like ourselves and continue to add on production. We do see slow decline in Parmesan around the world growth as, again, emerging markets, softer cheeses, less lead time. The big problem with Parmesan is you got to age it 10 months. It's not turning your money or your currency quicker. So we've been able to sedate and grow our category as the U.S. has continued to grow. They're manufacturing in this product, and as long as it continues to be good returns and it continues to grow, we believe more and more companies will continue to invest here.
All right. Thank you, Bob. I have one more here for Paul. I'm going to throw another one at you. Which Hispanic styles seem to be showing the most growth, the least growth, if you want to touch on that as well? Hispanic styles is, as we know, a category that includes a lot of different cheeses. So curious how you're seeing differences through the category, not just as a whole.
Okay. So education, there are 4 types of Hispanic cheese: fresh, melting, hard, and a crema, which is, we may not think of cream as being part of the cheese category, but many people of Hispanic descent do, and they're often shelved together. 4 types. The ones that are growing are the ones that are most different from normal cheeses. So the most different are the very, very fresh Hispanic cheeses: queso fresco, panela, queso de freír. You don't have an American knockoff of those. They're different. You can do different things with them. So they are growing and growing rapidly. Least different are melting cheeses, which, to be frank, some Hispanic cheese companies sell American cheese labeled queso quesadilla. It's not a growing category. The third is the hard grating cheeses. And as Bob has talked about so much about Parmesan, that is a stable to growing market where the Parmesan of Mexico, called cotija, has shown some growth. It has a different flavor profile than Parmesan and is often associated with Mexican taste. The other surprising growth is in these creams, which I find fat delicious, and it seems that American consumers do also. So adding more cream is a good thing. Grace, I hope that helps.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. I have one last question in the chat here that I want to jump to before we give everyone one last chance to unmute and share any other questions. This one's for John. John, when you talked about specialty cheese, does that include pepper jack cheese varieties?
Ah. And I need my Wisconsin data. I do not have within arm's reach, but I do not believe they have pepper jack in the specialty cheese category.
Okay.
And it is, they have a very defined list of cheeses that they are tracking year to year. But
All right.
I could let you know after the fact.
We certainly can. We can make sure to include that in our follow-up information. Any last questions from anyone on the line? Feel free to unmute or put them in the chat now.
Yeah, hi, this is Paul Delahunt from Wells Fargo. Quick question for really both of the guests today. Bob, in your presentation, you highlighted really what I see as the snackification trend and how that's affecting the parm category with some of the baked parm snacks that we've seen. I know Paul has experience in the baked cheese category as well. I'm familiar with some other companies who've put out some interesting baked cheese products, and it's a growth category. The question for both of you would be, just could you speak to snackification and baked cheese? You see a lot of hard cheeses paired with meats or something like that in the deli case as a snack, but what about baked cheese? And then a question for Paul being, what do you see as a snack opportunity in the Hispanic cheese style? Thanks.
I'll speak more on the baked cheese because I think I could speak a little bit about it. And as far as, our category, I do see it continue to grow. I do see them using, and I've seen a little bit of the R&D work. There's, besides, as Parmesan was the leader in the baked crisp business, I do see other cheeses coming to the market. And again, I believe they're going to start marrying it with other items as well, maybe some meat items. And so they're always looking for the next, greatest thing in snack. And I actually do believe Parmesan might take a little bit of hit as they're going to start utilizing some other cheeses and other flavor cheese in this baked category. A lot is driven on that baked cheese, and what a lot of the crisp business was, a lot of that growth was the keto diet. I mean, that they were driven, and it was an item that was safe to eat because of the low carbs and high protein. So we'll see how it continues to grow. I know it's off a little bit this year, but I know there's a lot of R&D, and you guys are going to see a lot of more different baked products, snacking products in the market. So.
Thanks, Bob. Hey, Paul Delahunt, how you doing, man? The headline on Hispanic and snacking is it's coming, and it's coming in more or less the ways you would expect. So, hey, Mr. Scharfman, can you package some little pieces of your cheese with these other things? And without tipping the hat at what those are, yeah, let's make a little assembly. Let's make a Lunchables with Hispanic cheese. Sure. What else could you do? Well, you could shred it. You could make little sizes. You could make string cheese sizes. Yep, all of those things are on the table. As Hispanic cheese becomes more and more mainstream, the value-added flavors and forms are also coming at us. Paul Delahunt, best wishes, and I hope that helps. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks to you both.
Thank you both. Any other questions from anyone else? Feel free to unmute now if you'd like to ask any more.
Just to note that pepper jack is not in Wisconsin's annual count of specialty cheeses. To the question earlier.
All right, and I am not seeing anyone else unmute. If you do have any further questions, again, you can drop them in the chat before we close here in just a minute or two, or feel free to send them to us via email anytime. We'd be happy to help you get answers to those questions. For now, we will go ahead and close things up. I want to say thank you all so much again for joining us today on this WCMA members only webinar focused on current trends in cheese sales. Huge thank you to our presenters today, John Umhafer, WCMA Executive Director, Paul Scharfman, President of Specialty Cheese Company, and Bob Greco, President and CEO of Cheese Merchants. Thank you all so much for the expertise and the insights and your valuable time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you,
As a
Grace.
reminder, we will be sending out a link to this recording of this webinar later this week, as well as some links to resources that we've mentioned and some contact information that may be helpful to you. So if you missed any particular details, don't worry, this will be recorded for folks to watch back again. And we want to invite you to our next members only webinar. We do these each month, usually on the second Tuesday, always at 1 o'clock Central Time. And our next session will be focused on dairy sustainability. So we'll have registration for that opening soon on our website. Be sure to keep an eye out for that. You'll also see communications about it in your inbox through our weekly e-newsletter that's offered to members only. And that newsletter is also a benefit that's available to you at no cost to any and all of your member employees. So if you're not receiving that already, it's got plenty of notes on these webinars and many other things we're doing here at WCMA for you. So feel free to reach out if you are not already getting that, and we will make sure it gets in your inbox. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful Tuesday afternoon, and we'll see you next time on.